realized it didn't matter where she was. The most important thing was to cool her body. Then get away, for she knew she was in danger. Memories filled her mind, and she felt fear swirl through her. She had to get away. There wasn't just one man, or two. There were 3 or 4. She had lost count how many had been on the boat with her. What she hadn't lost count of was how many days she'd been subjected to their desires. That was the throbbing between her legs. The men had forced themselves on her day after day after day, over 10 days. She remembered, because she'd counted the times the sun had gone down and come up, although she wasn't sure how long she'd been passed out for this time. Dia harus mati. She must die. Tidak, she whispered. No. This time she found a strength that she'd never known herself to have before. She raised herself up, ignoring the shooting pain and dizziness that swept over her. Away from the shore, the jeweled sea stretched to where the sea and sky touched. The water would be cold. It would help cool her. She must slip in. Could she swim somewhere? Away from the men who wanted to hurt her? She couldn't form the words in her native language, but she knew what the feeling was. Terror. These animals. These animals had pulled her from the streets where she had been babysitting her little brother, weaving fishing nets, as her father had asked them to. They'd held a knife to her throat and bundled her into a small van with no windows. Inside that vehicle had been dark and smelled like cigarettes, dog piss and rotten meat. She had screamed and clawed at the doors as they'd shut, but the streets were so busy, so noisy that no one except her little brother had taken any notice. She had heard him crying as the van drove away. Then there was just the roar of the engine, the stench, and the man in the back, leering at her. They all had thin moustaches and sullen faces. One had a cigarette hanging from his lips while another was missing his front tooth. The other 2 looked at her as if they could eat her right there. She had shrunk against the wall of the van, realizing it was unlikely she would ever see her family again. The boat had been small and the waves large when they had sailed. She had no idea where they were headed or why the men had even taken her. Not many hours had passed before the first one had entered the small cubicle where they had stashed her. The light had filtered in, and she had held her hands up to block the brightness. Unable to see anything but his silhouette, she had whispered to him, "Tolong bantu aku. Please help me." Instead, she had heard the tinkle of a belt buckle and a zip, and she had screamed again, trying to find a place to hide. There was nowhere in that small room. He had held her hands behind her back and entered her with a force that made her eyes roll backwards. Her scream had been swallowed up by the waves and wind that were pounding the small vessel. That had happened time after time after time. The men weren't far away now. She could hear their tiny voices drifting from the shore across the water, and the tinny sound of steel on earth. Digging. Quietly, she moved to the back of the boat and looked over her shoulder. They weren't taking any notice of her. She dangled her legs over the side and slipped into the water without so much as a splash. The relief was instant. The cold water enough to make her draw in a deep, quick breath. Salt stung her lips. Treading water, her feet sought the sand beneath the waves, but there was nothing. So she used one hand to hang on to the boat. Her eyes looked for an escape route, but her brain wasn't keeping up. "Iola, come on," she muttered to herself. Tears pricked her eyes. Her brother, her family. Where was she? Suddenly, 2 hands reached down and grabbed her under the arms and pulled her back into the boat. Opening her mouth to scream, one of those hands came down heavily across her mouth. "Shh! Don't make a sound. I'll try to keep you safe," the man said. He draped a towel over her shoulders. The first sign of kindness in many, many days. She wasn't sure whether to trust his gentleness or not.